Good afternoon again. It's 12:02, so I think we should get started. First of all, thank you all for joining. This is going to be a very casual, very quick presentation, and then Lacey and I will entertain any questions you have. Feel free to put your questions in the chat or the Q&A and ask anything you want. We'll do our best to provide an answer. So there's a couple updates I'd like to walk through first. And the first one being that our REIT equity offering is reopened, as most of you probably know. The shares were requalified by the SEC and the share price was revalued by the board. It's $686 a share, and the minimum investment is 15 shares or $10,290. The new REIT offering is very much like the old REIT offering. The one change that is substantive that I wanted to share with you is we are now permitted to reprice the shares more than once per year. We added that into the document because we are seeing land prices go up very quickly, and we thought we should have the option to reprice and keep your price more closely reflective of the fair market value. The other thing that we are in the process of doing that I'd like to note is we are implementing a board compensation plan for non-employee board of directors. Our board to date has worked on a volunteer basis, but as we're growing and developing, we're asking more and more of the board members. It's becoming quite a big time commitment, and we thought it's only fair to compensate them for their time and expertise. We also believe that having a compensation plan in place will help us attract higher quality directors going forward. And an update on our CEO search. We're all anxiously awaiting for our new CEO. The process has been pretty smooth to date. It takes a long time to go through this process, but it is going smoothly and as expected. The board established a nominating committee, which was a subcommittee of the board members who were in charge of managing, or are in charge of managing, the hiring process. They hired a search committee because they have not been through this process before and didn't think it was their expertise to do so. So they hired Noetic Search, which is a search firm that works on a retainer basis, largely with nonprofits. We are not a nonprofit, but we have many of the same attributes. Noetic received over 100 applications. The nominating committee they interviewed 25, and the nominating committee interviewed 6. There may be one additional candidate that came in late that they are going to interview. And the full board and staff have met 2 candidates so far, and we may meet a 3rd. We hope to have this wrapped up by the end of the summer, but all I can say is you never know with this kind of thing. So stay tuned for more updates, but that's where we are in the process right now. And the other thing I want to tell you about is our annual shareholders meeting is coming up. We are holding it tentatively on Friday, August 26th at 1 p.m. Central. It will be a virtual meeting, but after the meeting will be that Friday, and on the following Saturday, we are planning to host a couple firm tours, followed by a dinner for investors, board, and staff, and in the evening. So if you are able, keep your calendar open on that date, and more information will come shortly. And next slide, I think Lacey's going to tell you about one of our newer investments called Tulip Tree Farms. So I'll hand it over to Lacey.
Thanks, Donna. Yeah, Tulip Tree Gardens is one of our latest investments. It's owned and operated by Rachel and Jesse Smedberg. They're first-generation farmers that grow a variety of vegetables, medicinal plants, and flowers on their farm, in addition to raising a small herd of livestock on pasture. We're really excited to have them in our portfolio. They were founded on the idea that nature nurtures us. And so they're regenerative organic farmers, but they haven't been certified organic yet. And so as a result of our partnership, they're going to certify organic. And they're also very dedicated to the local food scene and community around Will County. And so they have a farm store on site, they host on-site farmers markets, and they have a variety of farm events. So I would highly recommend checking out their website if you get the chance. It's Tulip Tree Gardens if you Google it. And we have a bunch of new additions to our portfolio. Actually, it's been a record-breaking spring of new investments. And so I'll have a farm blast coming out next week with more information, but we wanted to highlight one of them in our short presentation.
Thank you, Lacey. And that's really it. So we are open to questions. I see one just popped up in the chat. So I'm going to take questions in the chat first. We had a couple that were sent in prior to this webinar and respond to those as we need. Has the lack of CEO hindered deal pipeline or fundraising? No, it actually hasn't. Fortunately, business has been business as usual. As Lacey mentioned, we've had a record-breaking year in terms of new investments to date. We've also had a record-breaking fundraising years in 2021. 2022 is behind where we were in 2021, but that's because the REIT shares have been, the REIT offering has been closed for so long. As it just opened up, we are seeing a lot of investors coming in. A lot of people have requested subscription documents and offering documents. So we expect that the pace will pick right back up to where it was prior to closing. But from a day-to-day basis, Andy Ambrioli has served as interim CEO, and he's done a fantastic job. I think if you ask the staff, everybody would vote for him to stay. Unfortunately, he's a full-time farmer and just cannot commit that amount of time. But he's been wonderful and really has righted the ship and kept everybody on track. We still check in very regularly as a team and have been getting our work done. Can you provide some high-level stats, farms, total investments, acres, and states? Yes, and I'm going to ask Lacey to jump in if I get my numbers off a little bit. As far as farms, I think we're just over 60, 61, 62. Yep. Our total investments are about 105. Thank you. Our acreage is just over 30,000, and we are in 17 states. What determines whether the REIT shares are open for purchase or closed? The REIT shares are almost always open. The only time that they have closed historically has been for repricing. And the one exception to that rule was this year when we closed for repricing early. We closed at the end of February. Typically, we would close in May. And we did that because land prices were increasing so quickly. And we thought it was only fair to our current shareholders that somebody new didn't come in and arbitrage a price increase by buying right before the share price was revalued and seen a big increase. Additionally, we had good fundraising years, so we had some extra cash that we wanted to deploy. I'm happy to report that that is almost deployed. It is all committed and should be deployed by the end of the summer. And the REIT shares will remain open indefinitely going forward, with exception of repricing, which will be at least annually and possibly more than once a year. I don't expect that repricing will happen more than a couple times a year, at least initially. Good question so far. Keep them coming. Lisa, you want to go to one of the questions that was submitted previously?
Yeah, I think we have quite a few too in the Q&A, Donna.
Okay. Okay.
We'll start with one question. How can we learn more about what other farms are on the investment radar screen?
Oh, that's a good question. We don't generally publish that information about our farms until the transaction is closed, just because you never know if it will go through. You know, things come up, farmers get busy, they decide to go a different way. The investment committee doesn't feel that the farm financials are strong enough. However, I guess in general terms, we are focused right now on the Midwest, as we have always been. That's where we're based, and that's where the majority of our farms have been. But we're also spending more time in the Northeast and also the East Coast in general. We're finding good opportunities there. We feel from a climate point of view that the Northeast is particularly attractive. So I guess the best way to stay abreast of that is just to read the investor newsletters that go out. We always try and highlight at least one or two farms. I think in the farm blast that's going out, we highlight about 6 new investments. And another way to check is just on our website, on the Farm Stories page.
Okay, another question is, are you concerned that rising interest rates might put many farmers under pressure nationwide, and that could have a knock-on impact on farmland values?
We are concerned, and you're right, there's farmland values are increasing, but with rising interest rates, that could certainly put a damper on that. We're also currently, our lease payments are a percentage of the acquisition cost of the farm. So we are looking at that internally, figuring out if there's another way to value the lease payments so that farmers aren't priced out of the market, i.e. so that they can't afford the lease payments. Our interest rates that we're charging have not changed. I have noticed that our borrowing rate has gone up pretty significantly in the last couple months, but fortunately at this time we're not borrowing any cash. But good question.
Okay, the next question is, what is the location of the new investments? And I can answer this one. We have 6 new farms we've partnered with this spring. They're in Indiana, Illinois, Missouri, Michigan, and Vermont. So very Midwestern based, but then we also have one out in the Northeast. The next question is, when will investors vote on proposed board stock options?
That will be at the annual meeting. The compensation for the directors is going to be largely cash. And again, it's only for non-employee directors, so outside directors. There is a small stock grant that's going, I think the value is about $5,000.
Perfect. The next question is, what parameters would you like to see to create a publicly traded REIT? Have you explored using an SPAC or SPAC?
We haven't explored a SPAC, but we have talked about publicly trading our securities. Right now, we're too small. Each of the exchanges have different rules on its size and what you have to do to qualify to be traded on their exchange. I don't think we qualify for any at this point, but it's something that we look at. We would like to have some better liquidity for our investors if we could. And we're continuing to just keep an eye out to see when a new exchange just opened recently, and I can't recall the name. But their requirements are a little bit less in terms of size, so we may eventually look at that.
Okay. You can start with this question, Donna, and then I can hop in too if needed, but it's if cannabis is legalized at the federal level, will the fund consider investment in farms raising hemp or cannabis?
We certainly would consider hemp. Actually, Tulip Tree, our newest addition, works with hemp, as does another farmer in Michigan. So yes, we would consider hemp. Cannabis is a little harder. I know banks don't lend on cannabis businesses at this point. We'll see if that changes if the Fed legalizes it nationally. Lacey, anything to add?
No, you covered it. That was good.
Okay.
Another question, kind of a different direction, is any issues for farmers regarding the supplies or distribution of their products?
Certainly, with the Ukraine war, that is been a factor in terms of less so for our farmers, but certainly input costs for conventional farmers. As a result, imports are harder to get and cost more. So many of them are going to organic inputs, which means that there's a shortage of some of those. For example, there's a manure shortage right now. Gasoline prices have increased because of the war, which has certainly affected our farmers' costs. As far as selling their products, I think pretty much everybody has seen increases in the grocery store and at the markets and prices of goods. That is beneficial to farmers. So that has been a plus, if you will.
Perfect. We have a couple of questions and stuff in the chat about BIPOC farmers and how Iroquois Valley works with them, how many BIPOC farmers we have in our portfolio, and whether there's any aspect of the work which focuses on healthy food access in low-income communities.
Ooh, good questions. We have just shy of 10% BIPOC in the portfolio right now, which the national average is below between 1% and 2%. So we're above average. We're working to increase that. One of the ways that we're really focused on is developing relationships and partnerships with organizations that support BIPOC farmers, one being Pot Liquor Capital. We recently launched Healing Soils Foundation, which is a foundation that is supporting BIPOC farmers. We have made our first grant to a woman named Rachel Jones at Locavore Sumac Creek Farm. And that's been great. Rachel is really been a wonderful partner so far. And we have asked her, we hold lunch and learns internally. They're just meetings for the staff and board members just on a specific topic, something related to our portfolio or finance or farming. But one of the things we really want to work on is training both our staff and our board about becoming more diverse. And we have asked Rachel to come speak to us actually tomorrow. She's a Black woman farmer, and she is going to speak with us about how she has been affected by racism. So we are working on a couple levels, I guess, in some summary, partnerships, education, and the foundation to support BIPOC. And unfortunately, we haven't done much in low-income communities to date. We don't do city-based farms, or we haven't invested in any urban farms. We've been investing just in rural farms so far. But interesting point and something that I'd like for us to look into.
For sure, definitely. Another question is, where's the REIT on offering operating lines of credit these days?
The REIT has, sorry, I had to think there for a second. We have issued approximately 10 operating lines of credit. They are still available to farmers. However, we generally like to give them as an adjunct product. So if a farmer comes to us with a lease or mortgage request and they need operating lines of a line of credit, we will issue it then. We found that it's a pretty time-intensive product and thought that just to do an operating line of credit is probably not best for the business. But we do feel that they're still needed, and we're happy to do them as an adjunct product. There are other groups that are now offering solely operating lines of credit, and they may be better equipped to just do that if that's all a farmer needs.
That sounds good. The next question is, how does Iroquois Valley get leads for new farms to invest in? Is there a basic set of criteria we can have in mind when thinking about suggestions to offer?
Sure, that's a good question. And we're really fortunate at this point in our existence. Most of our new leads come to us. We have a pipeline that we keep and review weekly, and there's probably 25 new farms on it right now. And that's from referrals. Some people just do research and find us that way, but I would say largely through referrals from other farmers that are aware of us or have worked with us. Some of the basic criteria, given our size, we like to do deals that are kind of $200,000 and up. Again, they're all time consuming, and the dollar amount doesn't, a small dollar amount size takes almost as much work. So that's kind of our bottom line. And the only other thing that we're really hard and fast on is the farmers either organic or willing to transition to organic within, I think it's a 12 months period after they sign up with us. So that's really all we look for. We work with all types of farms, dairy, livestock, row crops, vegetables. We now have Tulip tree, which is a flower. So really any crop is okay for us. Any location is okay for us, although, you know, we are cognizant of climate change, water issues, land prices for sure. But if you know of people, we get referrals frequently from both investors or just you know, people in our network other than farmers. So we're always open to them. So please feel free to send farmers our way.
That sounds good. Another question, how does management monitor the performance and risk of the portfolio / individual farms? Are the farmers required to provide financial statements? If so, how often?
There's a couple levels there. Before any farmer gets added to the portfolio, they go through a pretty rigorous diligence process. So we spend a fair amount of time, anywhere from, I'd say, 6 weeks to even up to a year, doing our diligence. And at that time, it's both a qualitative and quantitative review. And each farm that comes into the portfolio is assigned a relationship manager, and that's either Claire or Rhea or Alyssa. Dave still has some relationships. The relationship manager speaks with or visits the farm at least quarterly, and we like annual visits if possible. Annual financial statements are required by the farmers. But I think the relationship discussions with the farmers are really helpful, because if there's an issue, they tend to root those out early, and hopefully we can help the farmer get back on track before the issue gets too big. Lisa, do you have anything you want to add to that?
No, I think you covered it well. One thing kind of tangential to this question is, how does Iroquois Valley encourage farmers to share tips and resources with one another?
Yeah, that's good too. That's a good question, because we really do try to encourage that through a couple ways. Our farm blasts that go out and farm newsletters encourages farmers to reach out to each other. You may have noticed we've been posting on social media more frequently, thanks to Lacey. And that has been really helpful because farmers see what other farmers are doing, and they have their contact information if they have a way to contact them, I should say, if they'd like to. The relationship managers will work to connect to farmers if there's an interest and they want to talk. And I guess finally, I'd say we are still working on our demonstration farm, Rock Creek, which is about 50 miles south of Chicago. And that's a farm where we've done a lot of practice, organic and regenerative practices, good cover crop. We've done some agroforestry. We're working on some of the waterways to develop the streams and the land around the streams. So we hope eventually that will be a farm where farmers can come and learn.
Yeah, and I might add, Donna, too, I think this like resource sharing and community building between our farmers does help mitigate the risk portfolio wide, because if something comes up, the farmers have other farmers to turn to, our relationship managers connect them, and they can often work through situations that way rather than just struggling on their own.
Yes, yes, good point.
Okay, another question is, what are our goals for the next 6 months?
Well, I think our first goal is to hire our new CEO and get that done and get the person integrated and up and running. That would be, I'd say, our most immediate goal. We will probably add to the relationship management team because those individuals are key and are developing our farmer relationships. We are implementing some new software called the Brigo, which will help with the underwriting process and automate some of it. It's a pretty manual process at this point, and we realized as our fundraising has picked up pace, we'd like to pick up the pace of our deployment of capital. So we invested in a Brigo, and it looks like a great system. It's going to be used pretty widely by the firm. And I think that's, continuing to do more and more, buy more and more farms, helping farmers transition and work with our investors.
Yeah, that sounds good. On the topic of relationship management and farmers, we have a question about what is the approximate number of farmers per employee, and how many hires do you anticipate in the next few years, / what is the expected geographic diversity of these employees?
We have now 2.5 relationship managers, 1 part-time and 2 full-time, with a couple of relationships that are legacy with our COO and, as I mentioned, Dave. On average, there's about 10 to 12 farmers per relationship manager. Depending, some relationships are more time consuming than others, so it's not an exact science there. What was the rest?
New hires in the next few years, and then where they're located.
Okay, new hires. The one hire that keeps coming up frequently in internal conversations is relationship manager. We have talked about maybe hiring somebody in the Northeast. Right now, the Northeast is covered by Rhea, who lives in the Midwest. So that's a possibility. Maybe also the Northwest. We have quite a few farms there. And we have considered developing the Southeast as a region to help us build out our BIPOC portfolio. I would assume if we do buy a couple of farms in that region, that we will hire a relationship manager there. Overall, the CEO is the most immediate hire expected, then probably a relationship manager, and our COO is getting up in years, and we expect that he may retire in the next year or so, and would probably replace him. But that's still out there a little bit.
That sounds good. And This is a good question. So you said Rhea is based in the Midwest, but covers Northeast farms. And so the carbon footprint of in a week, she'll go visit all of those farms. How are we minimizing or offsetting her carbon footprint of that travel?
Ooh. That's a good one, and I don't know if I have an answer to that. I do know that she does a lot of driving. She will fly probably and then rent a car and drive around. She makes that trip once a year, and she's very efficient with her time and her travel miles. She tries to visit every farm she possibly can in the week or 10 days that she's away. But that's a really good question, and we should think of if there's a way to improve that a bit.
Agreed, agreed. I also know she rents an electric car or a very energy efficient one. She's told me before.
Excellent.
But yeah, that's a really good point. Okay, another question is, who are the ultimate customers for the farmers in our REIT? Are there retail customers, wholesale, other, etc.?
They're both. Some farmers grow exclusively for wholesale, others are wholesale retail, and some are exclusively retail. COVID required many farmers to switch from wholesale to retail, just because as restaurants closed, for example, their market dried up pretty suddenly. So farmers developed CSAs, they started attending farmers markets, they opened on-farm stores. I would say almost all of our farmers, not everyone, but the vast majority have some retail operation at this point, and a few are just purely wholesale.
Perfect. Can you say more, Donna, about how we engage with the rest of the organic sector and market, such as the Organic Trade Association, the USDA, commodity or value-added markets, etc.?
Sure. We belong to a lot of organizations and associations that support organic farmers. Organic Trade Association, we work with, we are a B-Lab company, which of course is a company that does good for the world. So we get a certification every 3 years there. We're a public benefit company. We work with many other associations and go to meetings, belong to groups to do networking among farmers or among investors that are like-minded. As far as bigger policy issues and lobbying efforts, we really don't do any at a national level. We do a little bit at a local level, but we do donate to organizations that support organic farming on a policy level at the national level. So with the Farm Bill coming up in 2023, we're working to make sure that we are supporting the groups that will help as much as possible get some funds for organic and regenerative farmers.
Yeah, that's perfect. I'll add that the Organic Farming Research Foundation, OFRF, is one of our partners. We've sponsored some of their work, and they'll be doing a lot of policy and advocacy for the Farm Bill. So we're proud to be partnered with them. And then in terms of the USDA, I don't know, Donna, if you want to talk about our grants, but I would say we collaborate with the USDA on a couple of our grants.
Yes, for sure. And our most recent grant is that we're working on now will be hopefully a grant that will help BIPOC farmers. I can't say too much because we don't have it yet.
That sounds good. That's very good. A couple of questions more about interest rates again. I don't know if there's anything else you want to mention about how they might affect share values or returns, or our financing procedures or processes. I don't know.
It certainly will affect our borrowing rates if we have to borrow cash to do a deal. We don't expect to pass the rates on directly to farmers, just because, again, we don't want to price them out of the market. We want to make sure that they're able to, that their lease payments are reasonable and they're able to meet them and still turn a profit at the end of the year. Our note payments to investors, currently that we're paying 2%. We just changed that about 4 or 5 months ago. We probably won't immediately increase it, but I imagine if rates continue to go up or remain high, that we will increase that over time.
Okay, that sounds good. You might have already answered this one. I just hope I don't want to miss it.
Okay.
Is land price growth the biggest driver of the REIT share price increase?
Yes, and I don't think you asked that, and that's a good question. And land price growth is the biggest driver. Our dividends have been nominal at best, I'd say. I think this year was about 45 bips. We do expect to pay a spillover dividend in late July, so that will increase, but still will be less than 1%. Most of the increase is due to land values going up. The share price went up 11% this year from 618 to 686. So that was a nice bump. The share price had been fairly stagnant, so we were pleased to see that. If we reprice our shares more than annually, I would expect that repricing to be in the fall. And if land prices continue to increase as they have been, I would expect that the share price will go up again. All that could change depending on share price or land prices. So no promises there.
That's true. Okay, another good question just popped up. What is the term of lease agreements with farmers? And if these are linked to land prices at the time of purchase, are there any escalation clauses in the contracts? And if so, linked to what?
Good question. The lease is typically 3.5 or 4% of the purchase price. Farmers pay those do not change over time. However, most of our farmers, our row crop farmers, do pay what we call variable rent. So as their revenues increase, which we expect to happen as they transition to organic and their yield is built back up to pre-certification levels, we expect that they'll be more profitable if the revenue and generate more income. So if the revenue increases to 3 times their base rent, we get 1/3 of the difference of that excess over their base rent. I didn't say that very well. It is a formula. It's complicated to say. It's pretty easy to implement. But there is an additional payment that farmers will pay, and that is in lieu of a rising rate on their lease payments.
Perfect. That sounded good.
Feel free to reach out to me and I could give you a better answer on the formula in writing.
Sounds good. Okay, management and directors own less than 2% of the REIT. This seems rather low. Any comments?
I don't think it's for lack of alignment of interest. It's probably more financial. 3 of our board members, actually almost 4, are farmers, not wealthy individuals. So it's just a financial issue. And I would say the same for management. We try and compensate our employees fairly, but nobody is getting rich, so to speak, on their salary at Iroquois. And that's intentional. We want to attract people that are here who work here because they want to and because they believe in what we're doing. But I can tell you that as a group, the employees and the board are very, very aligned in terms of what we're doing and our goal and our vision.
Yes, I can second that. Okay, so I think that's all the questions we have in the Q&A and chat. I realize we only have a few minutes left if anyone wants to throw.
Wow. I can't believe it's 12:40. That flew by.
Time flies. Otherwise, Donna, do you have any other thoughts on the war in Ukraine?
I hope it ends sooner rather than later, and things get back to normal. I think, again, there will be lingering supply issues. You're probably well aware that Russia and Ukraine supply a lot of the world's wheat. And that has certainly had an impact on farmers all over the world, as well as energy and gas. I would say those two things are both in input costs are the three things that are really affecting our farmers. And from a personal point of view, and to read about what the poor people are going through, we really hope that it comes to a quick conclusion. If anybody has questions that they didn't get to ask or think of after this, feel free to reach out to either Lacey or I. We're happy to answer anything you want to know. And I guess with that, we'll sign off.
All right. Thank you guys for joining.
Thank you very much. We hope to do this again, probably in 6 months or so. So it was great to have this time. And again, thank you for your continued support. Bye-bye.